they just all want to get on this show and gobble up all this important time. So let me ask you though, but you are streaming, right?
Yes, I am on Facebook.
All right. So you go to Facebook and then go to the timeline, click that on, you should be able to find her, no problem. I'm the only one that has problems on that, but when you operate in the basement, I guess. Hey,
okay.
This episode today, listener, you might call it he said, she said, they said. What is the real thing? It has to do with the cruise missiles, doesn't it?
It does. We actually now know what type of munition, not technically even, you don't even necessarily have to say missiles in this case. We use, the word munition because most people get things kind of, they think that when they think of big missiles, they think of the ICBMs that cost millions of dollars that this government makes. And what we're talking about are man-made cruise-like missiles. Think of them more as a small airplane. We know that I've personally spoke in depth with a aeronautical engineer, and Gordon told me that he felt very, very good about going out and saying that this was a CUDS-1 missile. It operates more like an airplane. You actually, are able to program this kind of like GPS. I think this is, kind of gets a little technical in here, so it's kind of difficult, I think, for people to kind of, grasp what they're doing. But this is the missile that he completely scientifically, and he said he would hold water any, but this is scientific fact, is what he said this missile was. There is no way to get around it. This could get to the Saudi Arabia facilities from Yemen. They had the capabilities. He put the components that he viewed, because Saudi Arabia was pretty nice and actually put out some pretty good pictures. For those of us, we'd look at it and say, yeah, it looks like a broken machine there. But scientists and engineers look at it and say, wow, this is a jackpot. I've got a lot of information here to work with. And so using those pictures and coming to the conclusion as to what they were actually operating, he basically said the mainstream media over the last 10 days saying that the Houthis did not have the capability of getting one of these cruise missiles all the way deep into Saudi Arabia were absolutely wrong, and that the actual distance that the CUDS-1 had is actually about twice as long as it really needs. So, it was really double the distance as the mainstream media is purporting to say on air. Plus, you have to look at what the Pentagon has stated on this. And so far, we have not got an unclassified report. I checked in this morning to see if they had released anything just yet. And so you're not hearing much from generals. You're not hearing much from people on the ground, that this is a huge attack from Iran, because it wasn't. Did Iran help with parts getting them? Maybe. We don't even know that, because Gordon explained that, look, you can get this stuff on eBay. You can get this on Amazon. I joked that I wasn't certain that Prime would get it there overnight. We had a good giggle about that, but you can get the components that would used that created all of this damage on the internet. So that's pretty shocking information, and that means that all countries, our allies included, all have to kind of take a look now at what our air defense system is going to be, because this thing went under the radar.
When you talk about Yemen and Iran, what is the differential distance difference? Big difference.
Well, I mean, they were saying that from Iran it was about 700 kilometers to get to where the missiles blew up.
Right.
So, and from Yemen, they said it would be around 1,000 or so. So they didn't have the capability of doing that. We now know that these CUDS-1s that we have, or that the scientists and engineers have now identified. And again, I want to say that this is 100% indisputable, because they use science, and these are people who work in the avionics industry in this country who develop these other systems that we're working on. These components can be purchased, and they've been used as commodities, and they can buy them online. So we don't know if indeed Iran provided assistance on this. It's quite possible that they did not, but we cannot say one way or the other, because we now know what type of instrument was used, and we know how it got off the ground and into Saudi Arabia and how much damage it did. So, when you think that, a missile like drone like, because it's really just like a small airplane, small little wings, can fly low, fly slow, gets under the radar. If something like this can operate, and if it comes from the Houthis, which presumably are not, the rocket scientists that Americans are, that is kind of a scary thing when we look at war in the Middle East, because now we really just don't know who is behind this. And what this has done is, while we identified what has been shot into Saudi Arabia, and we know most likely it's because they are in the midst of a regional war, and who comes out on top is anyone's guess at this point. You're looking at this, that, the Houthis, with a handful of people who have some, schooling, can actually put this together. It's not a recipe per se, but you can go online and figure out how to do this. And you have somebody who's, maybe good at the avionics, and they can put together they call them the gyroscopes that, they triangulate, and that's how they get these things to go forward. And go towards their targets. You can get somebody who's an engineer who knows how to build a small engine. These are literally just small engines, and surrounded with carbon fiber. And it was shocking, I think, to me, that people without a ton of technological training could actually do something like this and are capable of pulling something like this off. But they have. And we actually did witness something like this happen. So it makes our southern border a lot more open. And you have got people at the Pentagon and Homeland Security saying, wait a minute, we need to figure out how we're going to combat against this, because it's very difficult.
Seems like 7, maybe 8 years ago, you would see a thriller movie, and you'd see these little missiles shooting right above the ground, headed for whatever they were going to strike. And the similarity here is so much the same. And you talk about these low radar cross-section cruise missiles, and how the attitudes have changed now, the way, and it's amazing. But this source of yours, I really got into this stuff when he was talking about fuel consumption, and where you have to have the gasoline tank. And he said, I think, if I remember correctly, he said something about even in a civilian aircraft, the positioning of the gasoline is so important. The fuel tank. I'm saying gasoline, but the fuel tank, and on these little cruise missiles, it's amazing. It is.
So they're very. To the layman, if you would see this, it has like little small wings, like a small airplane. They're not very big. He's continuing his research into this. This is an ongoing story and an ongoing exercise for him, because he's going to. I asked questions like, well, how much did this weigh? And I asked him some other questions that I thought were important. He's like, I'm not there yet. He said, I thought that was very important before this story. He's never got out and put something like this out in front of the media before. But he said, I wanted to get out and before media completely blew this out of proportion and we go to war with Iran, and it could quite possibly something that isn't Iranians that actually, launched this effort into Saudi Arabia. So he's actually painstakingly taking all of his deliberations and proving all of this out mathematically. And we're talking a little more than the E equals MC squared. When we get to Z, that's when I'm out. I don't know more than that, but he wanted, in all seriousness here, he wanted this to make sure that when it went out, that it was above scrutiny, period. Because in science, there's no gray. It's black or white. There's no middle ground. And so we have the name. We know exactly what was flown now into Saudi Arabia. In the coming days and weeks, we will learn how much it weighed, how many, it would take to cause the damage that we have seen, or at least that Saudi Arabia has released out. So I think that, we're going to see some more, you're seeing more people that are inside, these highly technological fields that are lamenting what the media is trying to sell the American people and saying, look, they don't look at this as a Democrat or Republican thing. They're looking at it as like, well, this is my career and I studied really hard and I've been working in all this. And we know these, once engineers and scientists get into their little group, they virtually take no breaks and they just work through it until they get it done. They wanted to make sure that the American people really knew what was going on here and who has the capability of doing something like this. And I think that, for me, I'm grateful that I was able to speak with Gordon on this, but it's important. Yeah. Absolutely, that there are people that are working to make sure that the American people and the international world know exactly what we're dealing with, because we have technology that's able to do that. And this was a CUDS one, and this is, very helpful, and it should be helpful for the Pentagon moving forward to figure out what we're going to do next, if anything.
I'm going to tell you, the president and the Pentagon, they should be speaking with this gentleman.
Yes.
And they should be getting these facts. And there's so much involved. It's all this scientific stuff. And I'm going to tell you something. Just think about this for a moment. Would you rather listen to somebody like this or somebody like Adam Schiff tell what's wrong with the world?
Yeah.
Because when I look at what he's talking about, the TJ-100 engine, the drag of the Tomahawk,
yeah.
And the drag, of course, is mainly the wings and the weight and all that.
And the wind, yeah.
But there's one part here where he's talking about the Quads 1 fuselage section area. Just bear with me.
I know it is technical, but important.
It's less than half of the T-Hawk, 43% to be exact. It's like comparing a Boeing 777 wide body to the much smaller 737. Well, 77, 37, that's not that much. What, 40 maybe, something in there?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But the average person doesn't realize how much a little bit affects everything. It's
yeah.
the drag, Even race cars, I figured that
yeah.
out,
they air draft in behind, they hide behind cars, yeah. No,
Yeah.
It's important, but I also think too that, and I asked the question last night, I said, well, should we be concerned that drug cartels or other terrorist entities that may be inside Mexico, should we be concerned about them coming out and launching these similar type of attacks into the United States? And I think it took a pause for a second, and he said, I just don't see that the cartels, this has anything to gain for them, because the United States, if that happened, it would just completely bear down all of its weight onto Mexico and probably annihilate most of the country. And so at least he kind of walked me back from that ledge of being super concerned. But when you're looking at this situation, and he said, again, it's the internet and the ability to buy these components online that makes these components a lot easier to put together. And, I'm certain that they've, tried, did the trial and error over there. Well, this one didn't work, so maybe we need to move this. And in a roundabout kind of way, they get it. And also keep in mind, too, that, the Iranians, they did send 23 people over to Yemen. So it's most likely that they did assist the Houthis on this. If I would have to put a bet on it, I would say they probably did. And the Iranians are highly, highly educated. They have more engineers in their country than we have in our country. So you have to look at the totality of everything that's kind of unfolding and kind of take it all in and say, look, okay, now we know, we've identified what was used. Although it's really astonishing that the military has not come out and said, this is, here's what it was, and this is what maybe we can do. Maybe on the internet we can monitor who's buying these things up. If it's getting shipped over to Yemen or Iraq, we may want to put a little red flag on that. But it's most likely going through third and fourth people. I'm just kind of jesting on that. But, the fact that it took someone who did this on his own time, this wasn't on company time. He did this on his own time to put this thoughtful report together. And this is just the first in a series, because he feels it's that important that the country and people know what we're doing before we just leap headlong into war, because that tends to be what we do. We react. We just, okay, we'll bomb them. Well, if we understand what is doing and who is doing this, maybe we can come to a better solution that does not involve war. And to that, I give high kudos to Gordon for actually doing this and continuing his research, taking the time to explain this to a blonde. I mean, so I mean, I apologize. I think a lot of times I'm like, okay, I get this, I don't get that, but he took the time to do that.
I guess Kimberly Dvorak, Senior Foreign Policy Advisor, Committee for Responsible Foreign Policy, and the report today is, and then Gordon, he says, basically the fuel tank, I'm going to skip a lot of this, but I'm telling you, basically the fuel tank must be centered near the wing quarter cord location, fuel burning off as the flight allows the vehicle to maintain its center of gravity in the same position. It goes on and on and on. The resistance quantitative analysis is the actual range of the Quad 1, and here it is. It's at least 1,200 kilometers, more than enough distance to cover the flight from Yemen to whatever that is. That quake, I guess, close enough.
Yeah.
Just go to show you.
Yeah.
If you get somebody that's really into this, it takes a lot of guessing out of the equation.
It does. And now let me just kind of leave. I know we have a short little segment here, but I did ask about the detection, because we all kind of were asking and talking. I know we talked about it on the show last week. Why didn't Saudi Arabia detect this? Well, really the only method that we're aware of that could have detected something like this would be an ISR aircraft. And that aircraft, which is a spy aircraft, obviously, would have to been like near, and it would have had to be pointing at the cruise missile, so to speak. So, they could have started a scuffle somewhere on the other side of the country. And so now we would send these ISR aircraft down to that region, so that would make it a lot easier for them. But also, let's keep in mind that when ISIS came in and took over Iraq, they grabbed a lot of military arsenal of the United States. Our foreign military sales program. Last year, just Saudi Arabia, $67 billion worth of equipment. They are able also to reverse engineer some of these things when they bring down these countries. And it's just one thing, this whole event has kind of destabilized the whole thing going on in Saudi Arabia. Over the weekend, their chief of security was shot. We don't know if it was for another crime or what it was, but Saudi Arabia took care of him, and he was the chief of security for that country. So there are consequences. I think we'll see more of this in the future, and I think you're going to see, the United States at least taking a look at this and saying, yeah, we're going to have to sit down and relook at what happens, because now we have got the actual, we know exactly what they used. So that's a huge step. And hopefully, the military, Pentagon, and all those others are working on ways that we can ensure something like that doesn't happen again in the region, because this could spark World War III. It really could. So it's important that we know what happened, how it happened, and now we're going to learn more about what it took to actually build this, which is going to be very interesting, even for blonde.
The ISR aircraft. I'm wondering, and this is way out here, okay, because there's so many times that I talk to people and we're using American aircraft, ships and stuff like that still have components, where we're getting components from China.
Yeah.
Do you know anything about the ISR aircraft?
This is what I mean. This is the implications are this. When this happened, they're quick to blame Iran. That's always, the who to blame. But we always have to look who stands to benefit in something like this. And right now, China should be on that list. They could have a lot of the components in the stuff that America uses, but also the components that are used in these missiles and drones and that come from China. So we have to look. And this is why Gordon was so, he wants everybody to take the big picture in mind here, because this isn't just simply a small attack on one small country. It affects everyone around the globe.
Kimberly, excellent report. Kimberly Dvorak, Dvorak, streaming live. All right, when we're on Periscope.com, Facebook, YouTube later, and it's thekdreport.com. Look forward to our next report. Thank you very much.